First, though, Australia and pensions. And should we copy the Australian model and make state pensions in this country means tested, which would mean if you'd already made provision for yourself, you don't need the state to help you. People would go kick off about this like there's no tomorrow. 0207 862 2222 is the number to get in touch. Suggestions come from pensions expert Mike Ambery, who claims the government is considering adopting a pensions model such as the one used in Australia. We asked the Department for Work and Pensions if they were going to do it. They've said there are no current plans to change the pension system. That makes me suspicious. We'll have a look at exactly how the Australian pensions model works in a moment. But what do you think, just broadly speaking, Stella, is saying to people, if you've got the money, you don't need the state?
I don't think that's enough, honestly. I disagree with the Labour Party on this one. I think we need to scrap the triple lock. We need to increase contributions for people over the age of 50. And we also need to increase the pension age. It needs to be later in life. We have a demographic bomb in our hands in Europe, and we need to come to terms with it. The reality is people in my generation onwards are not going to have this type of pensions, and we are not able to fund the current pension scheme as it exists. Japan is already having a massive problems, and you see people working into their 70s there.
Yeah.
So we need to catch it in advance.
Okay, let's see what we can learn from Australia, because Australia do it slightly differently, but with similarities to us, which are helpful. So here we have a picture. Well, I said AI, give me a picture of Australia. So it's giving me Sydney Opera House and kangaroos. And I guess you could put an Australian flag down there as well. And they have a 3-pillar system. So I'll get a picture of 3 pillars here, and we'll put this in, and we're going to label these 3 pillars, because these are the 3 pillars that help us to understand Australian pensions. So in Australia, pillar 1 is the age pension. Pillar 2 is what they call superannuation. And then it's voluntary savings, the 3 pillars of the Australian system. I'll take them in reverse order if I can. Voluntary savings, bleeding obvious really, isn't it? First of all, is just trying to encourage people to save themselves. So and the state does that much more than we do it here. Okay, the second pillar then, this one here, is superannuation. And this is all about using workplaces to save. So at the moment, 11.5% of your salary goes into a pension scheme. You've got no choice about it. And it might even go up soon to 12%. So that's the second one. The first one really is the big one. And that's where we could maybe learn some lessons. This is what they call the age pension, the first pillar. You could call it the state pension because it's basically the same kind of thing, but with a big difference. So when you talk about the state pension in Australia, you're talking about something that is conditional on your own means, on how rich or otherwise you are. So if you're Mick Jagger or Elton John or Alan Sugar, you're not going to be able to draw down the same amount as somebody else who's poorer, even though you might say you paid more tax. So it comes when you turn 67, which is similar to the UK. But here's the thing. If you've got £300 per week income, £450 for a couple, if you've got that income, they start to slice away at your age pension, your state pension. So they're looking at how much you're earning. If it is this much, then you have a reduction. That's not, let's let it spell it out here. Then reduction. How bad is, what about that, Jamila? Just say, look, I'm sorry, if you've saved up £1 million, the state doesn't need to pay you 11,000 a year.
I know, but if you've put into something your whole life, why should you suddenly be told at the end of your life or coming to the end of your life, oh, sorry, you're not getting any of that back? That's outrageous, surely. I don't agree with that. I think. Well,
it happens with other things, doesn't it? I suppose let's just think of a good example: child credit, or even the latest one, winter fuel allowance. We've kind of accepted that you only pay things or pension credit to people who need them.
Well, look how well
that's kind of a basic assumption.
Well, look how well that's gone down. The winter fuel allowance has been a disaster removing that. And we all know that it's actually going to cost the state more if everyone who's entitled to get pension credit actually applies for it. So It doesn't actually make sense. I do agree that we should encourage people to pay more into their pensions.
You like universal benefit. It's very unconservative to like
universal benefit. I don't like universal benefit, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. The maths don't math. It doesn't add up.
The funny thing about your scheme, Stella, you're speaking now for 20-somethings, I know, is that if you campaign against the state pension, it's going to be your generation who lose it.
Well, there is no way that we're going to have the triple lock by the time I am of pension age. What I would say is in theory, I like universal benefits because I think it is important to have buy-in for everyone when it comes to benefits. And if everyone is receiving something, then everyone is okay with paying higher taxes. Mm-hmm. However, with the pension scheme as it is, we cannot afford it right now, not in 10 years, 20 years, right now. Yeah. And we say that we want to reduce immigration, and at the same time, people are not having enough kids, a lot of people are not having any kids. There is no time to rectify.
And if you just look at the Australian system, you just take a look at, you're not even looking at somebody's property, because that's problematic because they can't sell their house. You're saying if they've got £300 a week income from a private pension, then you start to whittle away their state pension. Would you be okay with that?
I don't think that this is a significant enough reform, if I'm honest with you. I think that... But
you'd want that at the very least?
No, I don't think I love the way that they have... What I don't like about this is that, for one, I think it is unfair to couples. And secondly, I'm not sure what is the incentive there, whether the incentive that you are giving to people is to end up a little bit poorer in later life so that they receive the full...
well, that's the problem, isn't it?
Also, £300 a week doesn't exactly make you, like, rolling in it. I think that's a bit of an extreme reaction. Also, they're saying they want employers to now contribute 11.5%. I think employers have been squeezed so much by this budget already. To think that we would look to squeeze employers anymore is insane.
Let's talk to Denise in Berkshire. Hi, Denise.
Hi.
What about the Australians? Have they got this one right?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know what the Australian system is like. The only thing is there'll be no point anymore if they carry on like this for anybody to work, for anybody to pay into a private pension fund, knowing jolly well they're going to be punished for doing that. I mean, at the end of the day, most people, especially of my generation, we went without so much to make sure that we had... My husband paid into 3 pensions, and we struggled, but we had to make sure that when we retired, we had enough money and we were comfortable. They're punishing people for doing that, and I don't know how they define rich. It's a bit like how they define working class. It's just they just bandy these words and these phrases
I think rich is I don't know. So a friend of mine said rich is you got 2 houses and £2 million in the bank. So she's talking about rich. I think the word is richer. They're looking because then it's completely different. It's somebody who's got, let's say, £500 a week income as a pensioner from a private pension. Now that's a lot, but whether you start to punish them for it, Denise, I don't know.
Well, what's the point then? What's the point of doing anything? Because I know, I was a social worker, and I know that on benefits, people can get an awful lot. And so those people that are actually just on the borderline are really struggling. And I just think it's so unfair that when people save, struggle through their early years of their life, that they're getting punished continually.
Well, thank you, Denise. It's a classic problem of the welfare state, isn't it? Is that the more of a safety net you have, the more people think, well, I don't need to make my own arrangements. Pete in Lincolnshire, hi.
Hello, Jeremy.
Now, are you a pensioner, sir?
I'm a pensioner.
Great. What do you think about Stella's prediction? Stella is quite some way away from 67. And she thinks that when she gets to 67, there's not going to be a pension.
Well, you're going on about this, as you said, you got £1 million in the bank and everything else. Why should you get a state pension?
Yeah.
So go the other way. Somebody like yourself who might have £1 million in the bank, why are you picking up 7.5%, 8% interest off it, and Muggins here, who's got £100 in the bank, is getting nothing?
Hang on a minute. So, hang on. That doesn't make sense to me. You're saying you get a lower rate of interest because you've got...
Don't give the person who's got £1 million in the bank, don't give him any interest on his money.
Yeah, you could do that.
He's rich enough.
I mean, then...
He's got £1 million in the bank.
Listen,
he doesn't need any money. Does he? He doesn't need any money. Why give him interest on it?
Can we just state on topic, are you saying don't give that mythical person, not me, with £1 million in the bank, don't give them a state pension?
No, give them a state pension. You've got a young kid, 17-year-old, just won £1 million. They've took £500,000 off him. Why shouldn't he get any money when he's getting older? He's put the money in the bank now and he's only 17.
All right, Pete, I've got it. Thanks. Oh, I don't think I have got it. Help me there. Was it an argument about pensions or an argument about interest?
We should keep the state pension, but not let pensioners who have millions in the bank to get
have
interest.
Yeah.
Which I think it's the opposite of what we should be doing, because we should be incentivizing savings.
Yeah.
And because of inflation, money in the bank is losing its value over time. So I want people to have more interest. I want people to be more educated about investing and less reliant on benefits from the state.
I'll come to you, Jamila, in a sec. Let's just take a break and then more calls. Should you get less money from state pension if you're rich or richer? Let's use the word richer. We cut in with our break there, but do you buy Stella's thing that we cannot afford it?
I think there are lots of things we can't afford. We can't afford the universal credit bill, which is exactly the same as the pensions bill. So I think we need to be looking at things like that as well. And not just, I don't know what the Labour Party's obsession is with penalising pensioners. I know it's a big bill and it does need to be reduced. Perhaps the triple lock does at some point need to become a double lock. But we do also need to be thinking about the welfare budget as well.
Post-COVID, I remember when the triple lock meant that pensions might go up 25% or something, because there was a very weird spring back in salaries. They did actually just ignore the triple lock 1 year, so they can do that. Let's talk to Jennifer in Swansea. Jennifer, you've lived in Australia.
Yes, I lived in Australia for nearly 38 years.
Oh, so you know it well. I've described it right, have I? This pension, if you have your own savings, the state pension comes down.
Well, when I left Australia, the ruling was that you had to only could have a certain amount of money in the bank before you were eligible to claim 1 cent from the Australian government. I can't quite recall the amount now, but that's what my husband and I understood. My husband was born and bred Australian and worked from 17 until he was 60 in Australia. As the years went by, he had his own business. I started work 2 weeks after I landed in Australia and worked as a nurse up until 2 weeks before I left Australia.
Right.
And we decided to come home because my husband had an illness, and I've been home now 18 years. My husband passed away 3 years ago. And while trying to sort out our finances, I wondered about, now we both had private pensions in Australia. We were fortunate to have good jobs and paid a lot of tax. When we left Australia, we took out my husband's private pension and left mine there. So anyway, as the years had gone by, of course, we had that had come into the household pot to be spent, and so I had kept my private pension up until I was 75, and then I took my private pension out because, again, the ruling is that if you leave it in after 75, you have to put it into an annuity, which I did not wish to do. But anyway, so I thought, I'll just make inquiries now about, whether my husband, I know he passed away, but whether he'd been entitled to any sort of superannuation in his own right, because he was born and bred Australian and his parents were Australian. Yeah. Anyway, as it worked out, I went all around the world trying to get an answer, even ringing Australia House, and eventually our accountant over here, I had asked her, could she find out anything
she rang
about
everyone,
it?
yeah.
Anyway, what had happened was that they've changed the rules now, that although you're Australian born and bred, if you go to reside in another country, you are not entitled to 1 cent from the Australian government.
Oh. Well, we've got that was a brilliant punchline there, worth waiting for, Jennifer. Thank you. We've got a similar thing here in that you don't get inflationary rises, because do you remember somebody aged 100 came back from Canada and said her pension was still the same rate as it was in 1976 or something. So thank you for that, Jennifer. So they can be brutal when they want to be, these Australians. Andy in Hampshire, hi. Morning.
Yep.
So Australia, good idea.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, really simple this. If you've got a lot of money, then you don't get a state pension.
Well, should Richard Branson receive a state pension?
Yes.
Obviously, the answer is no, he shouldn't.
No, I'm
He's
saying
entitled.
yes because I knew you were going to say no. I'll give you the argument for it. Number one, Stella's point is it makes him feel his taxes are paying for something. Number two, if you screen out all the Richard Bransons, you need to buy a computer system that's expensive, bureaucratic. And number three is he's paid more tax than us.
Okay, expensive and bureaucratic. I lived in Australia for 6 years, and a relative was in the process of claiming his state pension.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm listening,
Yeah. And he explained that when he claims his pension, he has to fill in a form declaring his assets and his income. And if he reaches a certain benchmark, the pension is reduced.
That's it.
If he reaches a higher benchmark, he doesn't get a state pension.
Right.
And he thought he was being punished, but in retrospect, he decided that the principle of from each according to their ability to each according to need was something that was a good ideal to have for a country.
Is it, though? Because isn't there an incentive there for him, in the classic George Best phrase, to spend all his money on women and champagne and the rest waste it? To just run his savings down so that when he fills out that form, he's got nothing. Because surely that becomes a really weird reverse incentive.
Okay, look at it from a different point of view. We took away the winter fuel allowance from pensioners who we deemed could afford to live without that entitlement.
Yeah.
But we are not prepared to say for people who receive about £11,000 a year, I think that's the average state pension,
yep,
who receive £11,000 a year, golden gift from the government, from the taxpayer, when they're in a position where that's just pin money. It's to pay the gardener.
Well, let me let Jamila answer this, because Jamila fundamentally disagrees with you, don't you?
Yeah, it's not a golden gift from the taxpayer. It's money that you've paid in as a taxpayer. So that logic doesn't quite add up, unfortunately.
Andy?
I'm a single guy. I've got no children. I pay in...
I think he's gone.
If I'm a guy with no children, I pay in my taxes for all those schools and child benefits, yet I don't receive any of those benefits because I have no children.
Thank you, Andy. That's another good point. The pause there was brilliant, because that's what's called a dramatic pause. Stella, what do you think?
I think, look, both arguments. I see the value in both arguments. I see both, and I agree that you don't pay in you pay in for all sorts of healthcare which you will never receive in your life.
That's true.
But you want to live in a society where other people are healthy because it has an impact on your own standard of living.
And the education one is difficult. I can see, I've heard people saying they haven't got kids. They are revolted by the idea that they are having to pay taxes to educate other people's children.
But people
that
have
is
to pay taxes for them to go to school.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I pay taxes for streetlights, to be honest. I never go walking in the dark. So, but you crazy. In the end, we are in a society, aren't we? Was that Mark we spoke to? He was brilliant. Oh, is Mark on the line now? Hi, Mark.
Hello. Good morning, Jeremy.
Yeah, how are you? We had some brilliant calls today, I must say. What would you like to say?
Well, basically, I'm in position of partly claiming some of my pension, and I think the point was made a very short while ago, the fact that with your national insurance, it is linked to basically the provision of a state pension. So as you know, that if you pay a certain level of national insurance, you then qualify for a state pension. Over the past 40 years, I've worked with my financial advisor, with my
Mark,
private
I'll interrupt you only because we have to take our break now. Stay there. I don't want to miss what you're saying, so stick with us. We'll take a few more calls. A lot of people thinking the Australian system sounds like the right thing. You take away the state pension from richer pensioners. 0207. So let's return to this idea of copying the Australian system. Really simple. You have a form you fill out, and on the form it says, "Are you richer than the king?" And if you tick that box, they say, "Well, we're sorry, you can't have a state pension," and we don't have that box on our forms. So Mark is in Portsmouth. Hi, Mark.
Hello there, Jeremy.
Sorry, you were taking me through your own numbers. Do you think you would qualify for a state pension in Australia?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the check is, but I think it goes back to the point you were making earlier, or one of your panel was, about what sort of the definition of rich. But I think the point is, in the UK, there's an awful lot of people that have hopefully done their pension planning based on a combination of private pensions or public sector pensions, and also combined with state pension, which they have been paying into via national insurance.
But it's more complicated, isn't it? A lot of people aren't saving. A lot of people say, my house is my pension. I hear that the whole time.
Yep.
And they may not be able to sell it. So what do you do when you sell it? You've got to buy another house. Well, what's your situation, Mark? You sound like you're a young man. You in your 40s?
Well, you're very kind. No, I've just turned 65.
Oh, right. So you're right on that moment then.
I am, and I'm actually taking some of my pension to supplement some income, because unfortunately I've not been able to work due to medical reasons for some years. But the point is that I'm in a semi-lucky position in that, as I say, I've worked with my financial advisor and hopefully have, saved as I should have done over 40 years to be in the position that I'm in.
I'm going to take a guess that you would not be impressed if the government said, look, you've saved, Mark, so we're taking half your state pension.
I wouldn't. And also, going back a number of years, I actually topped up my wife's national insurance for the very purpose of making sure she would qualify for the state pension as well. So it's a bit like somebody said, here's a contract, pay into it, and this is what you'll get. And then somebody said, we're doing a U-turn.
Yes, well, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Mark, so much. Let's go to Martin in Manchester. What about you? Do you think the government would be right to take the state pension away from richer pensioners, just like they've taken the winter fuel allowance away?
I don't believe that they should be taking it away in that method. However, I do think a progressive system where perhaps if you pay tax at a higher rate, then it should be a sliding scale and you should get less pension the more income that you have.
Okay. Would people not, because the state pension is worth quite a lot, you might be on it for 30 years, it could be worth £500,000 to somebody. They might start to think in terms of their pension planning, they've got to spend the last year of their career working in a really low-paid job to get round that new rule you've brought in.
No, not necessarily. It's the amount of tax that you would pay at the time of retirement.
Oh, I see.
And in future years,
it
would still mean you could save and you could enjoy that. But if your income was based on your savings, if you were paying tax at 40, 50%, then you would get less state pension, perhaps even nothing in the end.
Fine, thank you, Martin. I mean, of course, we were already doing that, aren't we? Because the state pension counts towards the income that HMRC look at when they decide your tax bill, even though it's a benefit. This is why that seems unfair, Stella, or not? No, you just think the whole system is broken.
I think the whole system is broken, and I struggle whenever people say that the system is unfair towards pensioners in any way, when it's so obviously the working people who are missing out.
Because a quarter of pensioners are millionaires, we're told. Although,
well, at least, but the problem is, I have all the sympathy in the world for anyone and everyone who is struggling, but the generation of pensioners, they had a lot of benefits which we didn't have.
Okay, let's remind you.